啊，哈哈，看到了，我们看到了艾森高普尼克哈，我想跟大家说一下啊，这是因为非常非常非常非常，然后说了很多非常难得，因为我们在跟高普尼克做这个三本书的过程中，很多次都邀请他来中国，然后我们其实中间有一次战卢也组团去到美国去见过教授。那我们首先哈想问问高普尼克教授，作为儿童学习研究领域的泰斗哈。也是著名的认知发展心理学家。那这么多年对于儿童心理这个研究的多年的这个积累，您写了大概有3-4本书，对吧？那对父母和工作或教育工作者影响最大的，刚才我已经给大家介绍了，是这3本书。那我想问问，首先问问您是什么启发了您去写下这几本书尤其是最受大家欢迎的这个园丁与木匠，
Well, I think the main thing was that I became a grandmother. So I had now had a new relationship to both my own children as parents and my own life as a grandparent. And one of the nice things about being a grandparent is that you can kind of sit back and look at what it means to be a parent. What does it mean to take care of a child? And when you're a parent, you're so involved in, as we would say, putting out fires and doing everything in a minute that you can't really sit back and reflect. And as I was thinking about it, I realized that there's a lot of research, a lot of scientific research that we developmental psychologists have done that is very relevant to the question of how do children learn from parents and grandparents? What's the relationship between children and the people who take care of them? How does that help them learn? And at the time, and I think still, there was a kind of assumption that all the science about how well children learned and how much they learned, that the moral was, oh, we need to put them in school. We need to teach them even more the way that we do in school. And that really was not what the science was saying at all. So I wanted to convey what the science really was saying to all these parents and grandparents who were thinking about how their children learn.
好，谢谢谢谢高普尼克教授给大家分享了些内容。刚才呢，高普尼克跟我们讲他为什么他怎么这个契机写下这3本书。我觉得有一点很好，就是说怎么说呢？其实在中国我们在中国里隔代养育是一件就是很普遍的事情。那么相对而言，我们会觉得西方世界会少一点，但是其实恰恰是因为隔代养育这样的一个身份的转变，促使一位这个科学家一位研究儿童学习的专家来去坐下来为我们的父母去写如何让孩子如何思考，孩子如何学习。那我想接着问问高普尼克就是也是给我们今天的直播做个热场，因为最近我们收到很多父母的反馈说就是非常，特别是中国的父母，大家都有这种望子成龙的心态，非常希望可以把自己知道的一切都教给孩子。那我们会在生活中非常用心的去教孩子，辅导他的功课，然后培养他的学习习惯，然后阅读什么等等等等，真的是全囊相授吧。但是我们会发现，有时候孩子不跟着我们变，对吧？他很难改变。那为什么孩子不愿意听父母的话，或者说我们要怎么做孩子才能够愿意接受父母的建议，还是我们做错了呢？那请高普尼克教授帮我们回答一下哈。
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say the work that I've been doing right now, I've been looking at grandparents, and the next book that I'm writing will be about how children learn, but also the special kind of role that elders and grandparents in particular can play in teaching them big, important things about the culture, things that parents might not teach them. And I have some lovely examples from Chinese graduate students here in computer science, for example, talking about how their grandmothers taught them about hard work or about persistence, even if they didn't know the details of computer science, and how those kinds of lessons were really important in their lives. So I am as we would say in America, I am on team grandparents. I'm very much in favor of grandparents. In fact, I now have 6 grandchildren. When I wrote The Gardener and the Carpenter, I just had 1, and then 2 more great nieces who are sort of de facto grandchildren. So I've been spending a lot of time with grandchildren and thinking a lot about the special role that grandparents can play. So stay tuned for the next volume. But this is actually speaks to something that you mentioned in your second question, which is that in science, we talk about a kind of back and forth between what scientists call imitation versus innovation. So if you think about how human beings have managed to learn as much as we do and succeed as well as we do, there's really two different pieces to that. One piece is learn from the people before you, learn from your parents, learn from your grandparents. Once you have writing and other media, learn from all of the wisdom of the past. But that wouldn't be any good if you didn't also innovate, if you also didn't take those ideas and give them a new twist, make them relevant to the environment that you find yourself in. And it's this constant back and forth between imitation and innovation, the science says, that enables us to learn as much as we do. And what I've argued is that children play a really special role on the innovation side. So children both are very tuned to what the people around them are doing. So even if they act as if they're ignoring what their parents are saying, they're paying attention, they're taking all of that in. But then instead of just spitting it back, their role as children, and especially I think as teenagers, is to take that information and give it a twist, think about it in a new way, see how it applies to the environment they're in now. See what does it mean in a world of iPhones, for example, to have a particular kind of knowledge. How do the ancient tales that your grandmother tells you, how do they speak to the moment that you're in now? And one of the things that we know, by the way, is that children do well when they have a number of different people giving them different information about how the world works. I think that's another really important role that grandparents can have. So your parents might think one thing about what you should do or how things work, and your grandparents think something quite different. And sometimes this is quite frustrating for parents. You know, why is grandmom telling you something different from what I tell you? But that's a very good source for the children of thinking, there's a lot of possibilities. There's what grandmom says, there's what mom says, there's what my peer says. Let me put all that together to try to make sense and make something new.
好，那谢谢高普尼克哈。好，那我接着问到这个书里面的一个内容啊，我印象特别深，因为在做这本书的时候，我们专门开了一个神仙会，就是请了很多国内的养育领域的专家、心理学家等等，我们一块儿去聊、去探讨高普尼克教授这本书。那这本书的这个译者之一就是清华大学积极心理学的这个赵玉坤老师，他自己说了一个很有因为他在书里面也写了，序里面也写了，他在我们的分享里提到了一个非常重要的叫什么速成的一种养育模式。他是说我们现在很多养孩子也好，或者我们教育也好，像焚琴煮鹤，把这个很好的这个很高雅的琴是吧，把它劈了当木柴了是吧，把这个高雅的仙鹤当做鸡煮了吃了哈。就是我们现在很多的养育方式就像焚琴煮鹤，但是其实我们可以很好的享受跟孩子更好的时光更好的去感受他、支持他、培养他。所以在这里我们想问高普尼克教授，您觉得这种焚琴煮鹤式的教育的方式的最大的问题是什么那为什么会造成这样的一个结果
Yeah, I love that example. I'll use it. I'll use it in when I'm writing and in the next book. And actually, someone who had read the book said that the metaphor of the gardener versus the carpenter, or the person who's making the orchard versus the person who's building a house, actually has an old tradition in a lot of Asian philosophy as a description of these two different kinds of approaches. Yeah, and I think there's two things to say about what happens with the kind of carpenter style of parenting. One thing is that it's very frustrating for the parents because it doesn't work. As you said before, the children will defy you and decide to do something else and figure, that some of the things that you thought you were teaching them, they don't learn, and things that you didn't even pay attention to are the things that they remember as when they grow up. So the first thing is that it's never going to be effective. And the reason for that is because it defeats the whole purpose of childhood. So if the purpose of childhood is to do things that are new, explore new possibilities, go out in the world and find new ways of doing things, then trying to sculpt a child to do a specific thing is just going to be, it's going to be counterproductive for parents, but it's also going to be counterproductive from an evolutionary point of view. It's going to sort of defeat the whole point of having children. And I like this image, the children are, if you think about being a musician too, you don't want to just have a musician play exactly the same thing over and over. What learning to be a great musician does is let you innovate, let you make a new kind of sound, make new music that you couldn't have made before. And that's a lot like what happens with raising children. So doing this kind of very directive parenting ends up kind of defeating the purpose of what it means to have children. I think that's what you would say about that.